Jose Aldo and Pedro Munhoz. I feel like this is a fight we've almost been waiting for quite some time. It's just crazy to see these guys fighting at this point in their careers. But one thing I want to say about Pedro Munhoz is that Jimmy Rivera fight was such a rise that I wanted to see from him. Right? You talk about those close fights with the Frankie Edgars and stuff like that. You really just see him becoming a better planned fighter. I think that going into fights, you saw him try to fight his fight and just get the most of someone. Whereas in that Rivera fight, such a front foot fighter and loves his boxing and great wrestling, but took out the leg with just such technique, right? That's what I loved about Pedro Munhoz in that fight. And what's funny is imagine a leg kicker going after a leg kicker. I mean, one of the game's absolute greats when it comes to the leg kicks, with now a guy who's finding tremendous success using it. For me, I think Pedro just has to really do some damage in this first round, right? Jose Aldo tends to struggle sometimes in the first, and even if you look at the Peter Yan fight, you look at the two Max Holloway fights. I mean, Max Holloway still took about 2.5 rounds to really get that, finish in him. And Peter Yan about the same. Now, the Peter Yan example, I just think that could have been stopped a lot sooner. A lot more damage was taken there than needed to be. And for me, I think that Aldo does have an opportunity here to steal a victory in the last 2 rounds. You talk about the Marlon Vera fight, boo if you want, but this is MMA, and that was a smart fight. That's where I'm seeing so much respect for both these guys right now, because at this age, to be able to do that and find ways to win, like that's what's getting you excited about watching these guys on the come up again after getting some wins. And for me, it's just, you think about how Aldo fights, right? He's going to have that reach advantage. He's going to be longer. But they both kind of have that similar stance, a similar way of kind of in and out fighting. And path to victory, I think that's the one thing Pedro Munhoz has to do. I think the in and out fighting and all of that experience that he's put into play. I mean, he's one of the main training partners for so many people at American Top Team, and you're seeing that translate into his personal success. I think that's one of the best stories in South Florida right now, because he's a guy that deserves it. And some of these fighters are phenomenal, and he's getting those big name fights like a Jose Aldo co-main event on UFC 265. And I think he has a good chance of winning this fight if he's able to kind of get in and out quicker, not take too much damage. Because the cool thing about this fight is, as much as you wouldn't expect it, especially based on the guys that Aldo's faced, he actually takes a lot less damage than Pedro Munhoz. Pedro Munhoz takes a lot more. And so that's where I'm seeing a lot of interesting stuff in this fight. Talk about takedown defense, right? Jose Aldo is just one of the most elite fighters you're ever going to see, because for me, for the amount of numbers I go through for each fighter, just over the course of time of doing this, Jose Aldo's, for who he's fought, correlating to the numbers that he has, is absolutely beautiful. And that's why I think he'll always go down as one of the greatest, and potentially the greatest featherweight of all time, depending on how the rest of this division plays out. But that's what makes him so great. And I do think he has a great chance of winning this fight. And I'm going to still go with a pick'em here. I feel like with so many close fights, it's hard for me to make the call, but I think that this deserves to be a pick'em, maybe an edge to Aldo if it's like within that minus, 15 points or so. But let's take a look. Wow. So Aldo opens as a minus 140. Munhoz is a plus 110. I mean, pretty even stuff. I mean, not even, but pretty close. And then now we're seeing it really roll back into that minus 125, minus 105 style play. I mean, for me, for how close this fight can be, money-wise, it's very tough to make the call. I do think Jose Aldo has, this is not all heart. I think that length style of fighting, I think the in and out style of fighting, and Pedro Munhoz was able to land a very interesting punch on Cody Garbrandt. That's a guy who gets into those brawls, right? I think Aldo has the ability to take damage, especially for 3 rounds, and dish it especially for the next 2. So if Aldo has a terrible first round, I still see him having success in second and third rounds. It's how he fought so much. But on the flip side, it's like Munhoz has to be able to flow with that fight. If he's having good success in the first, he needs to keep that going and not get tired and start to fight Aldo getting his groove, because that's what he does. And right now I'm leaning Aldo as well for the pick'em. So stay tuned for Twitter and Instagram final picks, but that seems to be the way to go right now.